Evening. I'm going to call the meeting to order. My name is John Samia, and I'm the chair of the Shrewsbury Select Board. On behalf of my fellow board members and the town manager's office, I want to welcome you to our September 10th, 2024 Select Board meeting. Tonight's live broadcast is being brought to you by Sarah Hashey of the Shrewsbury Media Connection. Tonight's meeting will also be available via the Shrewsbury Media Connection on its YouTube platform starting tomorrow, where all of our meetings are also currently available. Before I begin, I will ask that we ask our members to introduce themselves.
I'm Beth Cassavant.
Teresa Flynn.
Michelle Conlon.
Carlos Garcia.
Town Manager Kevin Mizikar.
Assistant to Town Manager Justin Dobson.
And again, I'm John Samia, chair. Next item under preliminaries on the agenda is to approve bills, payrolls, and warrants. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I've been moved and seconded, and all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next item under preliminaries is to review and act to approve the minutes of August 27th, 2024, which was a meeting, and September 3rd, 2024, which was a workshop.
So moved.
Second.
I've been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I was absent from the 27th. It just needs to be reflected in the minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. You want to abstain from those? We can take them separately?
Sure, that would be great. Thank
So
you.
why don't we take them separately? We'll seek a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes of August 27th, 2024.
Yes.
Second.
I've been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 So pass 4-0 with one abstention. If we could get then a motion for the September 3rd workshop minutes, please.
So moved.
Second.
No,
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, and thanks for the correction. Next item is under announcements and reports. Members, are there any announcements? Mr.
I've got
Garcia,
one, Mr. Chair.
please.
Thank
Yes.
you. So I just wanted to share with the community the Affordable Housing Trust will be meeting this Thursday, September 12th, 7 p.m. Here in the Selectmen's Meeting Room. And just wanted to note that on the agenda, there is an item. We'll be receiving a presentation from Habitat for Humanity of the Greater Worcester region to talk about their home repair program, which seeks to assist low to moderate income homeowners, including veterans and the elderly, who are struggling to maintain their homes. So those who are interested in learning more about that, certainly tune in.
Thank you. Any other announcements? I have two quick ones. First one is drop off for old recycling containers on September 21st, 2024, 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. at the Highway Garage at 211 South Street. Residents will be able to drop off their old recycling containers. This will be the last chance to do so. This event coincides with the yard waste drop-off. And also today we held office hours from 5:30 to 6:30. Mr. Garcia and I held them. We had some great conversations with 3 residents covering totally different topics. And we really enjoyed those conversations and want to continue to invite the public to come to our office hours held on the first Tuesday meeting of the month. We'll be typically in the room across the hall off camera and welcome your feedback, your questions, your comments. And we, like I said, really enjoyed our conversations today. So hope to see you. Look forward to seeing members of the community in October. And that's all we have under announcements and reports. Next item on the agenda is the town manager's report. Mr. Mizikar.
Board members, good evening. In my general report, 2 announcements this evening. First, I want to congratulate Kevin Weigold on his appointment to the Deputy Fire Chief's position. Deputy Weigold started in his position last week. We welcome him to the leadership team and look forward to his continued growth within the town. Long-term firefighter, served at the rank of lieutenant most previously, and I was pleased to appoint him to the deputy chief's position. Second, town manager office hours will start the 4th Tuesday of the month in conference room A from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. That will start on September 24th, so that'll be my first evening. So it will complement the board's office hours. So if folks have a question about a policy, service, or any area that they'd like to discuss with me, I look forward to that opportunity. always extend the opportunity for other engagement through one-on-one meetings, phone calls, emails. But this is a special set-aside time for folks if they're interested in that here at the town hall. So, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'll go directly into that 5A, which is an update on the status of the MBTA Communities Act.
Yep, please proceed.
And I look to provide some clarification for some confusion or matters that were handled by the planning board appropriately last week, but I just want to clear that up. So I want to start by saying that we will need to revise our path to special town meeting, but we still propose to hold a special town meeting on November 18th. And we'll be recommending a warrant to the board in the coming meetings that will include an MBTA compliant zoning bylaw on it. So I just want to recap what has happened over the last few days and clarify why the planning board did not take any action on MBTA at their meeting. So on July 19th, 2024, the town received an email requesting a revised GIS mapping file for the area that we're proposing for MBTA. Due to an error by town staff, those files were not delivered to the state until August 24th. So this error has pushed the state's pre-adoption review of the town's proposal back. Unfortunately, last week on Thursday, the planning board was in a very difficult position at their meeting because we did not know the actual impact of that error, but we had realized that the error was made and was likely going to delay the state's pre-adoption. The state's pre-adoption review is now expected no later than October 15th. I certainly will take full responsibility for this error, given the importance of this matter. I could have communicated much more closely with the state during the pre-adoption review period, and I've already contacted the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities and will stay directly involved during the balance of their review period. In order to get us to the October 15th, from the October 15th pre-adoption review new deadline and the November 18th special town meeting, the planning board will hold several special meetings to ensure that we do have 2 public hearings in advance of the town meeting, in advance of their vote on a final recommendation for the MBTA zoning bylaw. While I regret the delay overall, this new schedule will provide one benefit, and that will decouple the MBTA zoning article consideration from regular business of the planning board. We all know that given the significant projects that have been proposed within the community recently, that's meant that business like the consideration for bylaw changes have occurred very late in the night. This will actually preclude that from happening. It'll likely be one of the only things on the agenda and taking up at an earlier hour. So I think that overall may be a silver lining in this whole thing. So at this point, subject to some modification, I would envision the first public hearing for MBTA zoning to occur on the evening of October 17th. And then October 24th, 1 week later, would be the second public hearing with a planning board vote on October 30th. So those first 2 dates are Thursdays, and the third date is a Wednesday. So I hope that clarifies. Again, the planning board was in a really difficult position because we knew something was changing, but it was really inappropriate to have any discussion in public as to not say something that we didn't have full information on, and it did come out that we now know after last Thursday that will be October 15th that we have the information, and we will move forward from here. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, no, thanks for your report. Appreciate the clear explanation. As you had mentioned, last couple of business days, the impact was known. So that's, to me, when an issue comes up, really the first point is how do we fix it? That's the most important thing. And you've worked very quickly to not impact the ultimate date while pre-clearance will be later. At the same time, it does not impact what we were looking to do in November, and that was important. So I appreciate that. And the other piece too, just preventing from this happening again in terms of constant communication with the state, and I know that you'll do it. But again, I appreciate the buck stops here, accountability, but at the same time, the buck stops with all of us as well. So I think you've done a good job under the circumstances that this happened. Things happen. How we react to it, to me, is a testament to leadership, and that's the important takeaway from this, that this is something in terms of the impact known after the planning board. It's real-time information, and this is where we are today. So I appreciate it, but what's important here too is that you reached out and immediately were able to find out what we are looking at for dates, get a review date from the agency by the 15th of October, and it doesn't move the overall schedule. So appreciate the announcement and the explanation and the understanding. So that's all I have, but I just wanted to mention that. Any other questions or comments on this?
I mean, just to follow up on what you said, Mr. Chairman, I think the most important thing is that you identified a problem, but you also identified a solution.
Yep.
And I think it's a solution that keeps us on track to have this very important decision in front of town meeting on November 18th. I definitely felt for the planning board on Thursday night, watching the meeting from home. I know that there were some members of the public that were interested in hearing more about the MBTA plan that evening. But again, to have a conversation when we don't have that answer from the state doesn't put us in a better position than we were in when we decided to delay the conversation in the first place. So better to have all the facts. I do appreciate the planning board members. I think that they were put in a tough position, but they handled it in the best way that they could. And I hope that the community does understand that sometimes a board only has the information that they have and can't provide a fulsome explanation as to why something can't be discussed. But I think that this evening, Mr. Mizikar, your comments really explain what happened. And, the idea is to make sure that the public does understand that, there was a problem, it was identified, there's a solution, there's a path forward. And whether it's Mr. Mizikar himself, this board, we're going to make sure that this is really important and that it is treated with high priority.
Thank you. Any other comments? Great.
I was just
Oh,
going
go
to say,
ahead.
Mr. Mizikar, I mean, I agree that, we're purposely waiting for the pre-adoption decision. But in the meantime, the proposal is on our webpage under the MBTA zoning initiative. So again, it's there for people to review. But it mitigates any conversation of people sort of challenging what the state may or may not deem in compliance. So I just want to make sure that anyone listening is aware that it's out there. It's not like we're waiting to reveal what the plan is. The plan is public. It's just waiting for that next step in the process before we start to debate the merits of it.
Yeah, Michelle.
Could I just ask, I'm not going to repeat what everybody else has already said, but could I just ask that the dates of the meetings in the 3 meetings in October are added to the planning board's MBTA zoning initiative website? Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Great. Next item is public comment pursuant to Select Board Policy 31. We offer citizens the opportunity to provide public comments during our regularly scheduled meetings on matters within our authority. No one has expressed a desire to speak to the board this evening. However, those wishing to speak at future meetings can notify the chair through the Select Board's office by the end of business on the Monday prior to our next regularly scheduled meeting. Next item on the agenda is under meetings, hearings. There's not time on it, so it's a meeting with Jack Englert, Criterion Development, for their proposal regarding a local initiative program comprehensive permit, Chapter 40B, for a 196-unit multifamily development located at 409 South Street. I can invite you to come up.
May I sit here?
Yes, please, sit right there, whichever one, but be comfortable.
And I apologize for my casual. I came right from the site today, and I had to race here and decide whether to go back and change or come here, so I decided to come here. Jack Englert, Criterion Development Partners, 70 Wells Avenue in Newton. Thank you for entertaining us tonight. I do have a presentation, and it talks a little bit about Criterion as a company and also our vision for 409 South Street. We're not that new to Shrewsbury, we actually were involved in Quinn 35, which is a project we did a number of years ago. My mom went to Shrewsbury High, in fact, so I always love coming back here because it brings me a little closer, I think. Criterion is a company, we're a very small company. We've been competing with large companies for a long time. We started in 2004 and we're building only residential units, for rent units over the last 20 so years, probably about 7,000, just about 7,000 units over that time period. A lot of those communities have been in Boston, although we do have an office in Dallas. Having grown up here in Boston, lived here my whole life, it seems to be the area that I spend most of my time in, and so just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Criterion. I have a slide here that shows the Quinn 35 site. Everyone's familiar with it. We don't really need to zoom in on it so much, but there are a couple of photos there for everyone to see. I also included a few photos of our vision. We'll get into the actual Shrewsbury 409 South Street vision, but our vision generally on what we're trying to do. We're trying not to be, and we haven't been that successful, but we're trying not to be like every other developer, 4-story stick, surface park, multifamily deals. That is not our program anymore. We certainly did quite a bit of that over the years, and over the last 4 years, we've really made an effort to move away from that and be somewhat creative and responsive to communities and the needs of abutters, neighbors, and communities generally. So, I brought this one photo up here. This is a larger project in Newton, 204 units on the Charles River in Newton, but I brought it as an example. This was a 40B, friendly 40B, not a LIP program, although it's been converted to a LIP now because with the 40B and the NEF program, I don't know if anyone else is doing that in this community, the financing is such on the NEF program now, it's really cost prohibitive. So a lot of developers, if you have a relationship with the town and they're not against the project and it wasn't adversarial, they sometimes will allow you to switch from the NEF program to the LIP program. We just did this last night, actually, in the city of Newton. But that project we built over the last few years and just delivered the final certificate of occupancy. Some of the different slides here, I happen to think they're fairly interesting. This is a urban site, though, in Somerville, but we did manage to put a pool and create outdoor space, which I think is real important to the projects. And you can go to the next slide, just some interior shots of what we do. You've seen a lot of multifamily developments, and I'm not going to try to sway you that we do anything better than anyone else. We think we do, but everyone does. This is an interesting project we're doing in Newington, Connecticut. It's called the Mill Yard, and no one thought we should go to Newington, Connecticut, but we did it because of Shrewsbury, actually. We did, the same developer who built the Whole Foods and the strip center near, the lifestyle center near Quinn 35, came to us and said, we're going to do it again in Newington, Connecticut. Would you like to be a part of it? We did say yes, and off we went to, so this project here, Mill Yard, was really a result of our relationship here in Shrewsbury, so I thought I'd throw out the slide. Going to the proposed development, 409 South Street at the intersection of Route 20 and South Street. It's a parcel that's just off of Route 9 and connections to Route 9 both to the east and west at a lighted intersection. You can zoom in there a little bit and you can see, I don't know if it's my eyes or the quality of the I guess it's my eyes. The Chestnut Street and South Street there. It's an existing parcel of land. It doesn't include the house on the, I guess that would be the north side of Chestnut, but it does include the two parcels of land, or the two strips of land on the south. To our immediate east, I guess it would be, is a dog kennel, I believe, which, given the nature of our residents and the amount of dogs that we seem to see at every one of our projects, would be a tremendous amenity for us. I haven't personally spoken with a woman there yet, but I've spoken with a few people who are in Shrewsbury and know her and have spoken to her a little bit, and there's certainly a lot of conversation to have there, but interesting abutter for us anyway. The plan really is of 196. I think it says 198 on the unit mix. And it's really comprised of two types of buildings. One of the buildings is a 3-story, 2.5 really, because the 3rd story is within the roof line, trying to get some density but be different. And it was these two buildings at the front that you can see here in the photo are those 2.5 stories. But the majority of the units and the other buildings, there are 6 of them, are 2-story buildings. And this is the unit type and product that we're really focused on of late. And if you go to the next slide, I think you can see it here. The interesting thing about these units, they're flats. They're not townhouses, although they look like they may be townhouses. And their direct access to each unit is from the ground. So if you live on the 1st floor, you open a door and you're in your unit. If you live on the 2nd floor, you open a door and you're in a vestibule of your own and walk upstairs to where the living quarters and the bedrooms are. The advantage of that is it really feels like a home. You know, there's no center corridors. You don't have any of the things that are usually seen with 4-story developments. And I think it's an attractive idea to a lot of people, a little bit more autonomy, honestly, for the residents, and the ability to put some direct access garages in the units as well, where you can pull right into your garage and open the door into your unit, which is kind of a unique feature. We have 16 units in each of these buildings, so they're not tremendously dense. They're about 150 feet long, but individually 8 units per floor. And again, everybody has their own door at grade. You can go to the next plan, I think. Trying to figure out, you know, how it all fits together on this particular site. The site is challenged a little bit in terms of its slope, but that slope does provide tremendous views, however, and the way that we're able to, in proposing, to step down the buildings as it goes along the slope is something that we're very excited about. Again, the unit mix is a blend of 1 studios, 1s, 2s, and 3s with the commensurate 10% 3-bedroom units and the rest studios, and heavily weighted sort of to the smaller size of the units, because that seems to be the most, in this market at least, the most attractive to potential tenants. It's a lot to think about and a lot to digest, but I just thought we would like to get it out in front of the board and to see the initial reaction and take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Board members, questions?
So, I mean, I guess I could start.
Sure.
I know that you're here to present this, but also to talk about the possibility of the board engaging in a LIP. For the public, again, that's the friendly 40B process.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more, and I'm sure the community would, about ways that you would be able to partner with the community. You know, I know that we have talked before about different ways that the community would benefit, because I do think sometimes people hear multifamily housing and they see just the negative aspect of it, but there are oftentimes positive aspects as well. So if you could just give some examples of ways that you've partnered with other communities and maybe how you see yourself as a partner with Shrewsbury if we were to go forward with a LIP.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I would point first to the city of Newton, which is the most recent one that we did. It was not a LIP, well, it is now, but it was initially a friendly 40B. And I say friendly because the select members of the different wards were, my particular ward, were 100% in support of the project, as was the neighborhood, which I spent a lot of time in, talking about what their needs were, what would they like to see in a project, what could we do in that partnership role. In this particular case, Newton, we had a couple of things that were easily achieved. One is this neighborhood didn't have a community meeting space, so they would all gather at someone's homes and try to meet as a group. They did all kinds of functions and parades, and they needed some space. So we were able to provide that space within our building and create a community room where they can sign it out anytime they want and use it. Has a number of different, seating arrangements that can accommodate a lot of people, and it was something that the neighborhood really wanted. Now, since we built it, they've been, they've only been there once, and it was, I just think they now know we're complete, it's a finished product, and they'll start to use it more and more. The other thing, it was important to the neighborhood to have access to the Charles River. We took over an industrial site that was basically one big square building, and they didn't have a way to really get around it other than cutting around a parking lot and through a fence. We designed our project, and I think we could probably pull up, a slide might lead to it a little easier, if you would, Eric. We designed the building so that there was an alley, and in fact, the project's called alley, a kind of a pathway right through the center of the project that would invite the public through our project onto the river, and the amenities that we have built there for the public, including a maker space where we're trying to do artwork and engagement with the public. We have bike facilities where the public along the bike trail that rides along the Charles River can come in and fix their bikes, pump up the tires, and tune them as needed. So those sorts of things were fairly easy to accomplish. Other things that were requested that we want to participate with is this: we happen to abut a large playground field. It's called Forbes Field, Forbes Park, and they needed new lights for the park. They weren't able to do anything there at night because they had a defunct lighting system. So we were able to partner with the town and come up with the money to provide those sorts of lights. So there are things like that as we get into the process, we can learn about and make the appropriate change, adjustments and help as much as possible. We like to do that. Obviously, we're not trying to come in and say, okay, we're doing this our way, the highway, that's not our MO. We want to find things that we can help with because it's only good for the community if it's good for both the developer and the community as well. So the most we can, we'll do what we can do and are open to many ideas. I don't know those ideas today because nobody's really, we haven't gotten to that point. But to the extent there are things, I know there are improvements happening along Route 20 in the future, and that would require some sidewalks and things like that. And all of that is on the table.
Thank you. Thanks for the answer.
Thanks. A few questions. Just related to financing, previously at this site, back in 2021, we had a proponent for a project, specific type of project, and financing dried up. Do you have financing lined up already? Is that something, I know you've done other projects. Do you have financing already in the queue?
So in this particular case, we do, and I have 5 projects, and this is the only one that and I say that because it's a very difficult time right now to raise equity in this business. The interest rate change has adjusted the cap rate sale prices, so things don't underwrite like they used to. I think the only reason I have equity for this project is because the group that did Quinn 35 loved the experience, loves the town, wants to do it with us. So fortunately, yes. I have 2 other projects that, there are 6 groups circling, but they haven't circled me yet. So I'm hoping that happens, but in the meantime, what is exciting about this project is kind of the passion that equity source feels for this town and our experience here in the town.
And any timing constraints from those investors right now, or they're in it long as there's a...
You never know how the market goes. It
Yeah.
seems to be trending in the right direction. We're hoping that they stay with us, but they are anxious to do something now, and that's why we're here.
Okay, thank you. A few more. For these projects, how does it occur? So we have on the slide multiple buildings, understanding you're not looking for the 4-story buildings. You have the 2 and then the 6, right? So is it cascaded, or is it blocks at a time? How does the projects usually?
So we try to come up with a thoughtful way to build we want to build the entire project at once.
Okay.
But we think of a thoughtful way to do that, whether it's start in the back. So it's the age-old question. If you start in the back, then you have residents driving through a construction site to get to the units that are finished in the back. If you start in the front, then construction workers are driving through the residential to get to the
Right.
units in the back. So we come up with a phasing plan that makes the most sense. In this case, we've looked at it not completely, but I think there was an ability to open up one of the front buildings, which would have the clubhouse, and sort of do it side to side a little bit. So you could have a completed section on one side and less complete on the other, and not have the cross path of workers and residents going in opposite directions.
Okay. And once you finish the project, do you manage the property after that, or do you have a management company?
So
or-
it depends on the equity, but in this case, we have used a company called Greystar. They actually were very familiar with this site because they were the company that actually had it in. Now, we deal with the management side. I don't know the investment side and the development side. In fact, one of our equity sources was bought by Greystar, and they no longer are an equity source for me because Greystar saw me as competition and they didn't want them to further my goals. But we do love the management company. They're managing over 1,000 units for us right now. They've managed a number of units. Every project we've done over the last 6 years, both here, San Antonio, and Dallas. And we just feel very comfortable with their program.
Okay, thank you. And last question I have is, for a project like this, what's the strategy? Is it typically maintain for a period of time and then flip, is that really depending on the investors and what their exit strategy is, or is there really a model that you've carried forward with?
Yeah, so it doesn't depend on the investors, and it doesn't depend on the market. We've had projects, several of our projects right now we've owned for 7, 10 years. One of our original investors on a deal bought us out, most of our interest out. So that's a deal that we've been involved with for over 10 years. It just really depends on the market. Our goal is to create a community that everyone can be proud of, and that we can maintain in the way that everybody would expect it to be maintained. And so our investors typically have the same attitude because they're the ones putting up the majority of the money. I mean, they put up most of the equity, and we take care of the debt and a partial piece of the equity. So we're aligned in keeping the project as nice as it can be.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Who else? Teresa?
Thanks for coming in, Jack. I've had the opportunity to talk to you a couple of times prior to this, and I think I've expressed to you sort of balancing this with community preferences. So I asked you, why not commercial? Why not mixed use? Why fully residential? So could you speak to that a little bit so that we sort of...
Yeah, and it's a good point because a lot of people talk about mixed use and commercial in the first floor and those sorts of things, and we've tried it a number of times. Starting back in 2008 in Bedford, Mass, we created a town center, really, and we thought we did such a great job because the first floor, it was a town green with first floor retail around the town green, and very excited about it, and it lasted for about 6 years, and we couldn't move anyone in, and we were willing to give free rent in that case. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly equivalent to this, but we weren't able to get that to work. Sometimes, depending on its location and its visibility to a major street, if we were down closer to Route 20, there may be an opportunity to put some retail in there that would get the visibility, but we're having a hard time with our retail in our residential projects. We do, now this is a different niche altogether, but we have a project in Jamaica Plain at the Forest Hills train station, right at the intersection of the Arbor Way and Washington Street. It is like Main and Main, 4,000 square feet of retail on the first floor. 7 years we haven't been able to move anyone in there. So it's just a program that, with the right location, we can make it, we would be willing to try it. In Newton, in fact, we put 675 square feet of retail in, thinking we'd get a coffee shop because we're attracting the neighborhood to walk through the site on the way to the river, and we thought, wow, that'd be great to have a coffee shop there. People could stop, and unfortunately, it's not working. And I don't know, maybe I'm just the worst retail developer in the country because I don't seem to be able to pull it off, or it's the nature of what we're doing. But the program of residential on top of retail, I think will work in some communities. At Quinn 35, we didn't do retail in our project because we were right next to retail, and there was a sufficient amount of traffic and visibility, and having a supermarket like Whole Foods definitely drives a lot of that traffic. We benefited from that without having it in our building. But it's hard to recreate that on on sites that are not as front and center on some of these high-access roads. I want to be able to do it, I wish I could do it better. Maybe it's me, but I'm not very good at it. But I don't think there's a market for that in that particular location, at least, at 409 South Street. My answer.
Go ahead, please.
We've talked about the fact that there's a lot of residential development in that stretch of Route 20. So talk to us about the market dynamic. The layperson might say, like, it's kind of saturated.
Yeah.
You have Market Basket, you have Emerald Run going in. Now you're looking at almost 200 additional units. Tell us about what you're seeing for
And
demand for that type of housing.
I will, and it's a testimony really to your town, I think, more than anything else, because the town of Shrewsbury is a town that everybody wants to be in. The school system, certainly, not that we drive a lot of school-aged children, but the aura of the town is one that people, it definitely attracts people who want to move here, attracts investors who want to be here because of that reason. And, we have seen the demand side of the equation, particularly over the last few years, where there haven't been a lot of starts. The demand side is off the charts still. The supply side is being constrained, believe it or not, even though you've seen some development here in Shrewsbury on an overall basis. There's definitely a need for housing in this state and a lot of states, and being able to provide housing in the town of Shrewsbury is one situation where there seems to be unlimited demand at this point. It sounds crazy, but it's just the case. I've not seen a project, and it could have a little to do with the design, and people are excited about it, but I haven't seen a multifamily project in the last few years attract the kind of attention that this one has from investors and potential residents and marketing people who think they would love to take on this project because of the likelihood of success here.
Michelle?
Some questions. I'm sure you are aware of the MBTA zoning initiative that is happening across the Commonwealth, but within Shrewsbury,
Yeah.
this parcel of land is one that we have identified in our proposal to the state. Would you change your approach if our proposal goes through at town meeting? Would you change your approach to this development?
So because this is a LIP, it's really a cooperative process, and if the town came to me and said, we'd like not to see what you're doing, we would like to see X, I don't think the approach in terms of density would change, even though it would maybe allowed to change, because we find that 200 units in this particular location is sort of the sweet spot in terms of, when you rent 20 units a month and you get to 200 units in 10 months or 12 months, whatever, and then those units start to turn, and you don't want to have to compete against yourself. So that size unit and project is something that we'd be sort of committed to. If the town said, we really, don't want to see this as a LIP, we would love you to kind of work underneath another program, we'd be amenable to it.
What percentage of the units in this proposal are affordable?
25%.
25%. Would you stay, at that percent? Would you stay at 25% if the MBTA zoning does pass on this parcel?
If the town wanted me to stay at 25%, and not the constraints of the zoning itself, yes, because that's what I've underwritten for this project.
All right, I just have
Go ahead.
I'm just curious, you had laid out what you're proposing for number of bedrooms. I'm just curious, like, what is the square footage that we look at for these size, for the
Sure.
different,
Yeah.
unit sizes?
So a studio is typically 525 to 550 square feet. It's a studio that allows for a separate sleeping area, not necessarily a closed-off one, but one that has a separate alcove. And I think it's the most effective one in this market right now. On the one beds, we're usually around 700 to 750 square feet. That's a kind of a tried and true unit layout that we've had for a long time. It works very well. Access to the bathroom off the living room, access to the bathroom off the only bedroom. So we're really proud, and over time, if you've built a lot of units, hopefully at some point you get it right. And we feel like our one bedroom at that sweet spot, 725, 750 is a nice unit. When you get up into the two-bedroom units, they're closer to 1,075 to 1,100 square feet. And that really allows for a little larger kitchen, maybe a side-by-side washer and dryer, maybe an alcove for a study nook or something like that. So that's that. And then the three bedrooms, really to do a good three-bedroom unit, in my opinion, you need to be 1,250 to 1,300 square feet. And, you know, with two-bedroom units, usually they're opposite bedrooms, right? They're not stacked next to each other, but with a three-bedroom unit, you really have to put two bedrooms next to each other and then separate the primary bedroom from it kind of works for kids and things like
With
that.
the 2-bedroom units, are they more like kind of almost like 2 primary bedrooms?
I
So
would
it would be
say
like a
that.
roommates type of, a housemates type of situation?
Well,
or
even with
versus-
children, people like to have those primary field bedrooms, but the access to one of the bathrooms would be from the common area as well as a bedroom and not just from the bedroom. So not like a true primary ensuite.
Right, okay. And I just have one more question. You mentioned a clubhouse. Are there other sort of standard amenities that you're thinking, you know, for the apartment community? Are there amenities that you have planned right now? I know you did say that it sort of develops, you know, depending on what we want to see as the town and as a community.
Yeah.
You sort of cater to those wants, but are there other standard amenities that you're expecting to see in this development?
So right now, you know, having, with all the work from home that's happening, having individual rooms for people to work from home has really been very popular. In Newton, we built 4 separate rooms plus 2 conference rooms that can be used for that purpose. If a community room were something that the town were interested in, and the community room could be used for meetings for the community, obviously, but also during the day, sometimes as almost a WeWork. Not that it's a formal WeWork, but it's a space where people can go in and find a table and still be around. We find that people these days, they want to be around other people, but they don't want to necessarily talk to anybody. You know, sometimes they do, but having your own space, but a lot of stuff going on around you has been very popular. So if a community room were something that the town would have some interest in, that would be a natural kind of amenity. You know, swimming pool, obviously, gym, full-service gym, the kind of gym where you know you don't have to join a gym. It has all the kind of things that you'd be interested in. Teaching kitchens sort of come and go. We always put them in because if you live in a studio apartment but you want to have a dinner party, it's nice to have a large kitchen that you can move to, and that's why we have a dining room that also doubles as a conference room next to it, so people could have a party and, you know, reserve that space and not have to. And I think that's driving people to live in smaller units, actually, because if the amenities are such that you can spread out a little bit, you don't have to necessarily pay the big rent for the one dining room that you might use every month or 2 months or something.
Thank you. I think that's
Sure.
all I have.
Carlos?
Yes, I've got a few. Thank you for
Great.
coming in. And my colleagues have actually touched on most of what I wanted to ask, so that's wonderful. So you mentioned 25% will be affordable. Could you give a breakdown? Is it 25 per like unit type that are affordable? Is that how it?
Yeah, equally spread among the unit types and throughout the project, and no differentiation between an affordable unit and a market rate unit in terms of quality, countertops, appliances, the whole story.
Thank you very much. I had a list here, so I'm just looking through it real quick. You had mentioned the amenities, so appreciate that. I was curious about your, community involvement in other municipalities that you've worked with, so appreciate that commitment there. I don't know if could you speak to the price range of the units, or is that too early?
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of the affordable, certainly that price is moving, and we're trying to, we're trying to be a good developer as well as a profitable one. And on the affordable side, and there's been a big move in affordable rents over the last year. And in a town like Somerville, where we have 205 units, the affordable rent actually was allowed to go up 18%. We thought that was a little bit extreme, for sure, for somebody in that unit, and it could move people out of the affordability, for that particular not able to pay. So we took an approach where we wanted to be as fair as we could, and we went to the resident and said, we're not going to take it to the max. We're going to ask you to pay this, and if you can't pay that, we're happy to talk to you and try to work through it. So, I'm kind of proud of the way we're handling the affordable units. On the market rate side, market rate units sometimes subsidize the affordable units, so there's a willingness and a demand such that the rates are quite strong right now. I think interest rates coming down will maybe allow people to move into buying houses again more easily, so maybe the pressure on rentals won't be quite what it is today, but rents have moved in a big way right now. And I think on the underwriting here, a studio apartment would be very much like Quinn. So if we kind of tee off the rents in Quinn where studios approach $2,000 and one bedrooms get into the mid twos and two bedrooms into the low threes, it's a sizable rent for a lot of people, and we just try to balance, how to make these projects underwrite and still provide product that people can afford and enjoy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then I guess my last question would be on sustainability. What have you done in your other projects to be, I guess, more green?
So we're an all-electric developer now, I like to say. We have given up on gas, partially because we have to in a lot of communities, partially because we find it easier and simpler, I should say. Because of the new energy code, right, things have moved almost to passive house. In Newton, we completed a passive house building. It was the first one we ever did. And, it's amazing how little it costs to heat those units over the winter. Some of the units are surrounded by a unit above, below, and on each side, and a corridor, right? So you only have that outside wall, but people are paying, $30 a month for their heat. It was really, finally we did something that showed that it worked, and I loved it, and we'll continue to do that. So it's all about the insulation on the outside walls. It's all about the quality of the appliances, and everything's Energy Star, and the introduction of mostly more insulation and better efficiency, these high-efficiency heat pumps, which at one point, when you did a heat pump in New England, it was a cold winter. And now, these high-efficiency heat pumps really do a great job. So we're using those in all of our units as well. To the extent that we could put solar on the roof, we would like to do that. We've done that at our last several projects, and it's always in our program to do it. It depends on the orientation of the building, obviously, but on the larger buildings here, and even on some of the smaller 16-unit buildings, I think solar is a very good possibility.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. One other quick question. The average tenant stay, how long do you usually see it in?
I would say the average tenant is there, we sign 13-month leases, so always that, and then the turnover is what you have to look at. I'd say, if we have 40% turnover, it's probably pretty accurate. It depends on where you're located. If you're in the city, it's a lot more because people are changing. Sometimes they're there for graduate school and programs end, or when we move to the suburbs like Newton, our retention rate is quite high because people are in there and they don't want to move. I would suspect that's the case at Quinn 35. I should have looked at that and I didn't, but I will. I'm happy to do that because, certainly on the affordables, they're extremely, sticky. People get in there and they want to be there for a long time. And we're seeing more of that as our resident base ages a little bit. In some of the communities like Newton, where we're seeing an average age has moved up, 55 and older percentage of the units has moved from, what used to be 12 to 15 is up to 20 and 22. And so there's less moving, I'd say, with that demographic. So it is moving in the right direction in terms of people sticking around.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I just
Beth,
had
go
a
ahead.
couple of more questions, if
Sure.
you're all set.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So to go back to the sustainability, what about EV chargers?
Always have them on our projects, yeah. The equity group that we deal with in this particular case, the one that we were thinking of doing it with, requires it. It's a German fund, and they're, this ESG is off the charts over there, and they're trying to do everything they can. So LEED certification, we often are certifiable, but we don't always pay the $100,000 to get the actual certificate. But we build to the standard, and we meet the checklist and prove that we have met the checklist. Our most recent project, we thought we were silver, and turns out we were gold, which is a good thing. So we're definitely tuned into that. EV charges a lot. Bikes, we always have bikes, depending on the location, but we provide 20 or 30 bikes for people to sign out, so they don't have to necessarily buy a bike. If you want to take a ride, you can jump in. I'd like to see how they're doing over at Quinn 35, because I tend to buy the ugliest bikes I can find so nobody steals them, so I'm just wondering if there are any left over there. I
And
should
then,
check that
just
out.
my last question, if I'm correct, our building code doesn't, or the building code doesn't require elevators in buildings less than 3 stories, is that correct?
State building code.
Somebody's building code.
I believe it's 4 stories, but Jack may know better, Keith may know better.
Yeah, you can have a walk-up 3-story building. In fact, we have one at Quinn 35, but most of the time, 4 stories will have an elevator. 2 stories here with the direct access, it doesn't really make sense, because you walk into your unit and there's a set of stairs to get, you're in your unit on the first floor, and then the stairs within your unit lead you to the living space.
Right.
The 2.5-story buildings in the front would provide elevators.
There would be elevators?
Yes.
Okay.
So we would have the ability, so people who want to live not on the first floor, to get into those units on those buildings. On the other buildings, the smaller buildings, the first floor would be available, obviously, without elevator, but the second floor you'd have to walk up to.
Well, I think about accessibility, right? And
Yeah.
some of the feedback I've heard from the Market Basket Edgemere Crossing apartments is that there's no elevators and they're 3rd floor. So if you want an accessible unit, you're on the 1st floor.
Yeah.
And if you're on the 1st floor, you obviously are sacrificing some of your privacy, as there's trails and people are walking by, and there's, some more
Yeah.
foot traffic.
Yeah.
So just thinking about the accessibility piece of it, if someone were looking to move into one of these units, what
That's
their
one of those
options
2
would be.
larger buildings.
So that's good to hear that there would be elevators in the 2 larger buildings. Thank
Correct,
you.
correct.
I'm done.
Great, no, thank you. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you for coming in. I'd
Thank you
expect
very much.
We'll be
Appreciate it.
engaging in a discussion just about the LIP process generally, but thanks for presenting, thanks for answering all the questions that
No,
we had.
appreciate the time. Thank you, everyone.
Sure, we'll
Nice
be in
meeting
touch
you all.
soon.
Nice to see
Thank
you.
you.
Good night.
Good night, thank you. So, board members at this point can, and Kevin, you can provide an overview, but just entertain what was presented in front of us in terms of potentially moving forward with a LIP. There's some information I think that you wanted to go over to really put forth a lot of facts and information as part of this process generally,
Well-
because there's a lot here.
I mean, I have, I do want to frame this up for some further discussion with the board, or just to make sure that we're all on the same page. I have prepared some slides this evening that Justin can share to discuss. I just want to make sure that, we think about the opportunities that are presented. I know housing isn't always embraced readily, but we're in a difficult, spot. So being a municipality in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that has not achieved a 10% sustainable housing inventory. So I want to talk about what I prepared this evening, which I'm really looking to provide support to the board by reviewing those affordable housing statutes, our data that we have in front of us right now, and then suggest/discuss some points for consideration in managing not just this project, but, new development, in consideration of the limitations that's placed on local control. It's always been there, really. Chapter 40B's been in place since 1969. Municipalities have faced this, and I think perhaps as we move forward in this higher demand market, that we can find some leverage points to work our way through and perhaps achieve that 10% goal. But that's not really my focus. I just want to make sure that we're all framed and on the same page this evening. So I want to provide a little bit of background, statutory preference given to housing in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and then what is Shrewsbury's subsidized housing inventory. So with regards to statutory preference, we hear it, say it all the time. It rolls off our tongue here. Chapter 40B, right? This is a 40B project. It's a friendly 40B. It's an unfriendly 40B. The purpose of Chapter 40B, which was put in place in 1969, was to address the state's affordable housing shortage by streamlining the development process and reducing barriers that at the time the legislature saw municipalities putting in place that precluded some affordable housing development. There's benefits to developers if they go through this process and provide at least 25% of the units affordable. Affordable being defined as 80% of the area median income. So they basically can come in and override certain local zoning and permitting restrictions through a single comprehensive permit through the Zoning Board of Appeals rather than go through the traditional planning board process if they propose such a project with 25% affordability. There's other incentives that are provided to developers. Along with the expedited approvals, they get certain financing considerations that are subsidized through the Commonwealth. It's really attempting to be the big carrot at the end of the stick provided through the Commonwealth, which limits our control. So whenever a developer relies upon Chapter 40B, we don't have the opportunity, unless we've met our targets, whether that's the total target of 10% affordable housing under Chapter 40B or some interim opportunities along the way as units get developed over shorter periods of time. So where do we stand here in Shrewsbury right now as far as our subsidized housing inventory? Based off of 2020 data, we know that at that time, and this is the data set that we're bound by right now, it is only updated after the federal census every 10 years. There were 14,888 residential units identified, year-round residential units. At that time, there are 918 affordable units within the community, bringing us to a subsidized housing inventory of 6.17%. Now, that 918 is a current number, what's in place today. And the 1488, the one benefit that we gain is that being the denominator of trying to find the total subsidized housing inventory will not change. So 1488 will be our number through the 2030 census data publishing. So we can work towards getting a higher percentage over the course of time, knowing that the denominator of the math problem doesn't change. So in 2022, the board had a lot of conversations, both in May and in September or August later in the year, about local action units that are provided through a LIP. That's what the affordable units are called. When the municipality takes action and partners with the developer to bring affordable housing units to fruition in a friendly way through the friendly 40B process, and safe harbor opportunities. And safe harbor being the opportunity to not be subject to legal challenges associated with denying a project if we have not achieved our full 10% subsidized housing inventory. So with 10% being the target amount that's set in state statute, there's regulatory provisions for safe harbor in that if a 0.5% of SHI eligible units are created within a single year, for us would be 75 units, that we would be in safe harbor for a 12-month period. And if 1 full percent were constructed, we'd be in safe harbor for a 2-year period. So with regards to being able to draw upon the safe harbor provision, we need to have a housing production plan in place, which, has been part of the discussion, and we're currently in the process of getting a housing production plan approved at the state level as we work right now. So this 1-year period and 2-year period begins once a project is permitted, and is a continuous period from that permitting date. So while we are certainly experiencing what feels like a higher level of development interest in the community, I have just provided the slide that was used a couple weeks ago during the housing production plan about the relative number of units that are being constructed per decade. Obviously, we're new into the 2020s, but you can see historically we're not reaching unprecedented levels, although that pressure feels a little bit greater. Obviously, the community is more developed in the 2020s than it was even in the 1990s, so things feel a little bit different, but the total number of housing starts, actually, as Mr. Englert said earlier today, isn't as strong in the community as it has been in some points in time. So finally, just wanted to talk about how we put all this together and have a discussion or may want to think about this. So I called this slide establishing a point of leverage. So what is it about 40B that we could utilize to have the greatest level of control over housing development in the community, given its relative unfavorability amongst residents, which is certainly not unique to Shrewsbury. So 40B exists. We know that zoning alone cannot be a controlling factor from preventing residential development within the community. Extract yourself from Massachusetts and go to most other states across the country, and zoning would be sufficient. If you zoned a parcel for commercial use, then no residential development would go there. It would be a commercial development. That's not sufficient in Massachusetts because of Chapter 40B. Without permanent or interim safe harbor, local control is severely limited, right? Someone can come in and build that residential development on a commercial lot, or they can go into a commercially or residentially zoned area that may only be identified for single-family homes, compile a number of lots together, or take a single lot and build at a greater number than our zoning would provide, even in that residential district, leveraging Chapter 40B. All periods of safe harbor are finite. So even the 10% threshold is subject to review on a 10-year basis. So once we get back to that next census, if we have not maintained a percentage of growth within the affordable housing component of our residential units, we would be subject to the provisions of Chapter 40B again until such a time that we reestablish 10% SHI. So inclusionary zoning was a key provision that this community put in place several years ago to help maintain the level of affordable housing and hopefully not regress, although over the last decade we did slide backwards a little bit because of course inclusionary zoning requirements only comes into play once a minimum number of 6 units are being constructed through at a single time. So my suggestion as we look at both this project and perhaps other things in the future is figuring out a way that we can use interim safe harbor to get to permanent safe harbor. It's very straightforward that the regulators understood the challenges of severe or rapid housing growth within the community, and they wanted to give communities the opportunity to pause, make the right decisions for themselves. And I see interim safe harbor giving the board the opportunity to leverage as much authority as you can in controlling the outcome of proposed developments as possible. It truly gives you the opportunity to say a hard no once safe harbor is achieved, whether it's for that 1-year period or 2-year period. Since we have some ways to go, right, we're only at 6.17%, need about another 500 or so, more than 500 units to achieve the subsidized housing inventory. If we can manage that, and I've tried to correlate that to, laddering friendly 40Bs to achieve permanent safe harbor, using those rungs of the ladder to manage the pace in which residential units are developed, finding the right partners who are going to construct those units, and opining and shifting and managing where those units are going to be developed within the community, to eliminate ancillary concerns that come with these types of developments. So again, first and foremost, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. As a 5-member board, this is the first opportunity that you've had, the 5 of you together, to consider whether or not you want to enter into a LIP program and go on the friendly 40B process. So I just want to primarily talk about that, how I see the program, and what a path forward may be for developments like this. And I'm look forward to the discussion and answering questions if you have them.
Sure, thank you. There's a lot to unpack here, right? One is strategy. I think that before we can get to a comprehensive discussion on strategy, I think there needs to be a little better understanding as to what shape a LIP would take. And tonight we had a discussion about a LIP and a friendly 40B. And in front of us tonight specifically for discussion would be, do we want to authorize the town manager to go negotiate a LIP? And to see what that means as part of this process. We have compliance at 10%. We need 571 more units. That's the law. We know that. And in terms of safe harbor, whether you get 1 year or 2 years, or you rather ladder them together, you still have the backdrop of the statute. So one approach could be we do nothing. One approach is exactly what we're talking about, I think, to add a little more color to the conversation, have a more robust conversation, will to have an example of what this LIP could mean, assuming if the board authorizes, to get some shape as to what that actually entails and understand how viable of a strategy that would be. I think it would help inform a discussion broader than potentially authorizing the town manager to continue. The question, I think, will come down to ultimately how best, given the statutory framework, we want to control our own destiny. And we understand there's a lot of pressure from the community, the feeling there's a lot of development, would like for it to stop. We understand that. We're all residents of the community. I think it's also important to look at the chart that Kevin had presented. Mr. Mizikar, when you talked about the growth in the 70s and 80s really were the heyday for a lot of the apartments, but I know to a lot of members in the community it doesn't feel that way. So we're mindful of that as well. But it's also how do you address 40B? We're a desirable community. We're at 6.17%, and we went backwards. Now, we know the number is fixed until 2030, maybe a little longer, but it's not going to be like 2020 because we don't have COVID. But the denominator's not going to move for a bit. But what does that mean in terms of our strategy? So I know there are a lot of factors to consider in addition to just a general, hey, do we want to authorize the town manager to have the conversation, to negotiate, not approve, to negotiate, and then bring it back in front of us, what this looks like, and then engage in a discussion as to the pros and cons of a LIP, the pros and cons of the strategies, And at that time, I would think when the LIP's presented in front of us, have the broader discussion about strategy. These are a lot of good suggestions. And there's, again, I think this is, looking back at the 2021 discussion that we had with one of the LIPs presented in front of us, this really puts together all of the considerations in front of us. So I find this very helpful, not only now, but also if and when we elect to authorize the town manager to have discussions to, again, follow these run rules, because these are what the law prescribes that we have to work within. And then the question is how best to manage within the confines of the statute, but also understand that there were real reasons why the statute was put in place in 1969. So a lot here. I recommend tonight that obviously everyone comments, questions to the town manager, but to focus on the narrow issue, if we want to authorize the town manager to move forward with potentially negotiating a LIP to bring it back in front of us, and then discuss the merits of that LIP and how that fits overall with the strategy with respect to 40B. So that's how I see it, but I'm open to comments, questions, suggestions. But it's a lot of information and it's complicated. So understanding that. So any questions or comments?
Just
Michelle.
A clarification, if we authorize Mr. Mizikar to enter into negotiations, that decision would come back to us.
That's what I'm proposing, that it would be to give us an opportunity to understand what a LIP means. And there were good questions about partnering with the community and how did Criterion, what does that mean? What's the form? And he had brought up Route 20, you know. More granularity, he's at the beginning stage, right? You're not going to invest time, energy, effort if there's no desire to proceed. But it'd be helpful to understand what that means with Route 20, with the community, the partnering with that, to have more chances to hear details behind a lot of that, because to be fair to any proponent of a development, you're only going to invest so much up front. So yes, that would be what I'd recommend, but obviously I'm open to the discussion. That would give, I believe, the opportunity to really evaluate a strategy and how a LIP could play together with a future strategy. Okay? Any other questions, comments? Go ahead.
I think that it's important to reflect that we're here and closer to achieving safe harbor because of the amount of development that we've had, and not because we've had an active strategy. I agree, excuse me, with the town manager that we've done certain things, the inclusionary zoning, the affordable housing trust, CPA, et cetera, but I don't think those in and of themselves have really moved the needle. I am concerned about additional development in this area at this particular time. So within a 3-mile stretch, we have the 250 units that went in at Market Basket. There are 390 units in development between Hills Farm and Emerald Run. This would add 190 units plus UPS off of Centec. And it's a lot in a short period of time, and I don't think that we get to see the impact of one before another one is already rolling. So, in a perfect world, I personally want to pause. I want to say no. But saying no to a LIP doesn't stop the development because of our limitations under 40B. And I'm reluctant, but the town doesn't gain anything by not looking at it. So I think we have to emphasize, we're not saying we will do a LIP. We're not approving anything. We are debating whether or not we authorize the town manager to at least explore so we know what we're dealing with. But, I know that, Route 20 is under Mass DOT, but I really want us to be focused on any mitigation or improvement for residents in that particular area. So I would, if we do vote to authorize the town manager to evaluate a LIP, to be really mindful of that when looking at the process. So again, I think it's important to recognize a lot of what we've heard. We've been in this situation before where we've engaged in a lip with the prior developer. I just think that a lot has happened in terms of development, MBTA zoning, community, feedback regarding the development in this area. And so I just want us to be very cautious.
Okay. Comments?
So, I don't know if this would be the opportunity to suggest something that we'd like Mr. Mizikar to include in a discussion about a lip, or if that's something I should take up offline, because I have just some ideas as to what I'd like to see if we're going to entertain a lip for this property, as far as like improvements to the road, et cetera.
Sure.
Okay, so just given the location, right, Chestnut Street's a little bit narrow, it's a difficult vision, right? So I would like to have a discussion, or Mr. Mizikar, when you're talking to Criterion, to have a discussion about the road improvement for Chestnut. And then also understanding that there's a master plan for Route 20. Is there an opportunity to get some sort of land set aside where we could get sidewalks down to Route 20, or even the other direction to Route 9? People do walk along that area, and I think that could be something that could alleviate some of the pressure of vehicles. Like he talked about having bicycles. If people are able to get to the bike path, it's eventually going to be on Route 20. That could help with some of the traffic. Not all of it, obviously. So those are just two things that kind of came to mind. Understanding that I hear competing directives from the community, right? I hear a need for more affordable housing, a need for places for the certain generations, right, our young people. And then also, as I'm listening to the discussions around the housing production plan, it appears that there's like this new demographic of 40 to 50-year-old single women that seem to be looking for places to live also. This seems to be the type of development that could answer some of that need. So I also hear, though, right, to your point, we're oversaturating, we're too much building too fast. The levers that we have in our control to slow down and come to a pace that's more comfortable with building and development is to reach safe harbor. And I understand that means that there's short-term pain, but I don't see a path to being able to slow the development until we hit that 10%, or until we do, what was on one of the slides where you increase your units by 75 to get to that 1 year, so that we can kind of breathe a little bit. I'm glad Criterion came in this evening. I want to make sure that people understand that developers who are purchasing a piece of land that is for sale through a private land sale don't need to come before the board. So we have an opportunity here to decide whether we want to be a partner or whether we just want to let this happen to us. As you said, I would much prefer to be able to control our own destiny a little bit here and have that conversation. Mr. Englert seems like a very reasonable man. He seems to want to do well by the community. We know that we see a successful project in the Lakeway Commons. So I am in favor of having the manager go forward and start negotiating this lip. I'd like to see what comes back to us and then make a decision from there. It's only a first step. But again, it's a first step in getting us to a point where we would be able to at least breathe a little bit and maybe say no to the next one if something else comes, and we know something else is going to come along. The other thing too is, that parcel of land was already something that came before us through Greystar. Their financing didn't come through. 2 years later, here's somebody back again. What's to say if we say no to this and he, doesn't build something there? It's just going to be someone else probably coming down the road. So again, the person you know versus the person you don't. I think it's important just to take the next step.
Yeah, what's important here ultimately, and I am in favor of authorizing the town manager to negotiate and then bring back, is I think about 2021 when the LIP came in front of us, we had a discussion, but not discussion about strategy. In 2022, in front of this board, we had a presentation about strategy and options available to us, and now it's a couple years later, and the question comes down to whether it's this or not, that it seems a little contradictory that I understand a lot of people, hey, enough, right? But at the same time, given the statute and the requirements of the statute for 10%, we don't have that authority to stop. So the important part to me is yes, to authorize going forward means that would have something presented in front of us, but I'd like to have that robust discussion about strategy to see what that actually means in light of whether it's this development or future developments, because we know that the issue isn't going away. We're at 6.17%. We add a few, great. We're not at another 571 units. And until we have that, or until we ladder it, then anywhere a developer wants to put it, we're subject to that. So I think it's been a great discussion. I think a little bit we're in the abstract as to what a LIP means. We can ask for things. It does seem to be a willing participant with a track record in Shrewsbury that has been productive. But that being said, I think right now there's still a little bit of an information deficit as to what this actually means as part of any strategy. So there are a lot of questions that we all have, a lot of questions that would be answered. I think it did be best answered once we understand what is a partner willing to do. And a friendly 40B does seem to be where most communities go. There aren't a lot of unfriendlies, but that doesn't say when you're almost 4% below the 10% requirement that you're not subject to them. So I think there's a lot of good discussion still to happen, a lot of questions to be answered from about what this means in terms of the LIP, what it means for the community, what it means for our strategy going forward, what does it mean for us, for all of us. We're all residents. And I think, and look forward to the discussion that we'll have going forward with that. So what's the desire of the board in terms of just the narrow, understanding there are a lot of questions still, but authorizing the town manager to engage in discussions to negotiate a LIP, not approve it, and then bring it back to us?
If I may, I think the questions I had tonight about, he's proposing 25%, Criterion's proposing 25% affordable in this project, and he is willing to maintain that percentage even if the MBTA zoning passes. That may end up having a lower percentage required. We do have inclusive zoning that only requires 10%, and I'm not clear on what our MBTA proposal requires, but I don't believe it's 25%. So if we have a developer here who is interested in working with the community and is willing to maintain that higher percentage of affordability in this project, if the MBTA zoning initiative does pass, I think that it's, getting our 10% affordable is really our only way to sort of be masters of our own destiny. And like everyone else has said, there are growing pains. And, there's been improvements along Route 20 that were intentional. They were decisions that have been made over decades in this community to improve Route 20 in order to, be able to utilize that area of town. When I first moved to Shrewsbury, there was nothing on Route 20. It was old, dead drive-in theater and, just a lot of unused space. And there's been decisions over decades that were intentional in developing and improving Route 20, and we're seeing the product of that now. And, there is that short-term pain, but there is a longer-term vision here that this isn't all just happening. These aren't things that are all happening in vacuums. This is part of a long-term vision for the community. I think, just his willingness to work with the community and to include, things that we want to see, I think is an asset when, our hands are tied with development coming in here with not having our 10%. So I'm in favor of authorizing the town manager to enter negotiations and bring them back and see what they look like.
Well, thank you. Carlos?
Yes, I'm also in favor of authorizing the manager to negotiate a LIP. Was really, I think this is my first one, so, you know, it was nice to learn more from Mr. Englert about his proposal here. And, you know, Kevin, I appreciate you providing this background on, you know, where we're at in terms of our SHI and, you know, offered some suggestions on how to get to the 10%. I think that, you know, attaining that, I know that we'll talk about this in a future meeting in a more fulsome discussion, but, you know, getting that 10% I think would just be so key in allowing us to just have more opportunities to guide our future, which I think is something that we hear in the community often, which I think, you know, it's showing that we're trying to be responsive to those demands, asks. And, you know, it's certainly, as the Affordable Housing Trust designee from this board, it's in alignment with the plan that we have as a trust approved earlier in the year. So, you know, I certainly would be interested to see where the negotiations lead and to have that discussion in the future once it's more prepared, I guess.
Yeah. Information included, and Beth, you alluded to this housing production plan, you know, the cohort of 30 to 34-year-olds in town. We haven't had much migration. We still have challenges with 25 to 29-year-olds. Like, how does this all fit together? And it's all inextricably linked. So what does that mean, and is this part of that? So I think the town manager's presentation sets the framework as to what needs to be considered at a future time, and other areas that have been presented, I think, need to be drawn in as well with the housing production plan, what we're looking to address, who we're looking to be as a community. So there are still a lot of areas to discuss and a lot of issues brought up tonight to consider at a future meeting. That in itself probably could be a whole meeting just to cover the topic, and if need be, that's fine.
I actually think it's really important. I caution us not to go so far as to look like we're promoting this. I think that we're giving this consideration because this is what we do. Like, we very rarely don't at least explore a LIP, because it's either, like, what do we gain by saying no? So, like, to me, that is what we're looking at here. I mean, we're going to hit this regardless of a LIP or not. We've seen the demand. We're going to see developers come in. So I agree that by default, we're probably going to hit that 10% one way or another. There's a little bit of strategy involved in terms of how we get there, but we're that close. And I do think that our next step is, what are we going to do when we do hit that 10%? Because I'm concerned about not having a strategy for how we're going to address continued development. Like, are we going to say no to everything, or are we going to be, you know, how are we going to make those decisions that are balanced with what's in the best interest of the town and what's aligned with, you know, community preferences, et cetera. So to me, we do need to spend a lot of time really looking at not just getting to that 10%, because we're a lot closer than we've ever been, and then sustaining that 10% as we look at whenever the next census denominator is. But what we're going to do once we actually do have the ability to say yes or no to future development.
Yeah, well, you delineate between multifamily units versus residential housing. One thing that we're looking at is there are a lot of parcels in town. I remember when I started out on school committee, a question that I had asked many years ago, hey, are we done building in town, right? The school population had grown in the 90s from 3,800 to about 6,000 students, so it's been pretty constant. Now we're about 98% built out. Well, we know in some of the work that we've done in our land group that there are large parcels of property that, okay, another strategy could be, does the town want to accumulate land? Like some towns do, that's something we could absolutely talk about. But as Beth had said earlier, it's still private property, and as long as it's zoned for that, we have very limited options, so that could be part of a strategy. To me, the market, you're right, that we'll get to 10%. It just comes down to some of the points brought up earlier, that if we don't get to 10%, or we don't do anything to get to 10%, then you could have 4 projects in the same place on Route 20 that we're concerned about now. So I see a lot of value in this discussion, because it does control the pace. If you get a 2-year moratorium, it controls the pace, and you set the quality for the developer that wants to come into the community in a project that we believe would be in the best interest of the community. So I agree that until we get 10%, the market could drive multiple developers in here, but then we have absolutely no say. And it could be in locations that serially in 3 different parcels next to each other in the same area that just don't make sense for the overall community. So partnering is a valuable discussion to have as part of our overall strategy, and these are all good points. But that's the thing, that you have zoning in 40B, but then you have private property. And just to remember, this community, many years ago, I think there at least 4 times had an opportunity to have minimum lot size, I think an acre, and they were turned down. And doesn't mean that we don't talk about a strategy and embrace that for private property too, or at least identify it, but understand that options are limited, and we explore that and what we can do. So there are a lot of pieces to this, but my most important takeaway is that we're talking about strategy, and we're talking about being proactive. And that's important. We've talked about strategic planning, and that set a plan. Here, it's talking about laying forth a path for our town to address a major challenge that we have. For a good reason, we're a great community. But then going forward, what else should we be talking about to make sure that, to Teresa's point, putting words in, that we maintain our vibrancy as a community too, right? That we're thoughtful and plan through as much as we can, control what we can, right? And then work through and be thoughtful in other areas to mitigate growth where we can.
So I will make a motion to authorize the town manager to negotiate a LIP and development agreement with Criterion Development relative to the proposed project at 409 South Street.
Second.
And then moved and seconded, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? None. The motion passes unanimously. So, Mr. Mizikar, if you could just keep us apprised of our upcoming meetings, on the status, and look forward to, appreciate the discussion tonight, a lot of thoughtful comments, the preparation for the meeting by you, Mr. Mizikar, by all of you colleagues. I think we had a really good discussion, brought out a lot of issues that require to be tackled, and look forward to our discussions as we move forward. So thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is financial business fiscal year 2024 year-end review. Mr. Snowden, welcome.
Good evening. All right. I wanted to just take this time to go over a couple preliminary financial items from fiscal year 2024. I'll go through what the few slides I have, I think 3 or 4 slides, and then if there's any questions, we can go from there. So FY24 budget in total was $146,208,009. Right now, we're looking at the turn-backs, or the amount that was unexpended of that operating budget, to be $2,084,657. That's about 98.5% expended. And as a snapshot compared to last year, we're about 800,000 greater in turnbacks than we were in FY23, the previous year, I mean. But if we do like a multi-year average, we're pretty close to the FY21 through FY23 average of about 1.8 million. I think the main contributor to FY24 turnbacks being slightly higher than previous years is most likely related to the ability to utilize ARPA funds to help cover operating costs and other items. And then on the slide here, we have local receipts. These are the actuals, and then for FY25, you see the budget number. If we just look at the last column, there's the asterisk. At this point in time, we are anticipating increasing the budgeted amount at the special town meeting for local receipts. And so $14,500,000 was what was approved at annual town meeting, but that number was most likely going to increase at the fall special town meeting. So we can go, yeah, this is a perfect slide. Thank you, Justin. All right, here we have budget versus actuals. These are the main category buckets that we break out local receipts in. This is most commonly reviewed in the revenue manual that comes out at the beginning of the budget cycle. So we have our largest, one of our largest buckets is the motor vehicle excise, and then the next largest one would be interest and investment income. It's difficult for us to budget where some of these revenue sources are difficult to really get a grasp on, and it's not that every category is significantly higher. They're all within our normal margins, but the vast majority of the additional revenue came in two buckets that are elastic, and overall there's about a 43% difference between budget and actuals for FY24. If we go to the next slide here, this is just another visual breakout of those same categories that we saw on the previous slide, and we can see really that motor vehicle excise is driving the vast majority of the revenue that's being received through local receipts. And then interest and investment income, what you're seeing is budgeted versus actuals. Other excise, departmental fees, and licensing and permits, we are able to use our modeling software to get really good budget numbers that are safe and that the state thinks that we don't put the town in financial harm, and the modeling doesn't help us truly understand MVE growth as it's being seen here. And I think that's the last slide we have for FY24. I can answer any other direct questions to dive into this in any greater detail if that is helpful for anyone.
Thank you. I have a comment on a couple quick questions, and I'll open it up. ARPA funds, just generally, our next presentation soon, but safety net as well, now that we're in September. Those are expenses we need to consider as well. I know that we're getting into the cooler season again, and hopefully they can be expended, but if I remember, we're starting to get to that point of where we're saying if they're not expended, we need to find another home for us. So we're in mid-September. A couple quick questions on Schedule A receipts. So MBE, can we tell, I know cost of vehicles have gone up quite a bit, and there was a lull with chip issues, so people couldn't buy cars. Is this driven by more new cars, price of new cars, both? This is the new normal? I know it used to be like 6 used to be like the number, 6 million about.
Yep.
Is there any, I know the software can't help us, but can we tell? We do get the bills in. I know when I
Yeah.
got my new car.
I think it's a combination of both. I know Kevin's done some research on this. It's a combination of both, for sure. We have more people, and we have housing that's gone into place, and the prices of vehicles are increasing as well. So it's not one sole element, but it is a combination of both. The value of cars has significantly increased as well.
I can, because looking at housing data really recently, I can tell you, like, the larger high multifamily housing developments for like Edgemere Crossing and Quinn 35, I say only, but you're only looking at about $100,000 in motor vehicle excise revenue from those two properties combined.
Mm-hmm.
So that's net new, right? Like,
Yep.
perhaps those folks didn't live in town before. So the further I looked at it in this, kind of preparing for this meeting, I agree with Dave that it's mixed, and certainly those aren't the only two new developments, but I think I'm starting to lean towards total price of vehicles
Yeah.
being the largest factor. Probably one of the most inflated or inflationary impacted factors of our Schedule A receipts.
Okay. And it makes sense. And the other piece is the interest income. And I remember a couple of years ago when we thought it may have been an anomaly, right? Where the number all of a sudden was a lot higher than we had experienced in the past. We were at the 12, 13 range forever, and then it went up. Is it fair to say this is looking at, a lot of this is based on inflows, outflows, right, and balance, Kevin? So this may be more closer to the new normal than an anomaly, and, right? I mean,
I wouldn't say it's the new normal. I would say, while our operating balances are going to be pretty consistent moving forward, I would expect, since we're highly invested in treasuries,
Okay.
that the interest would decline. I think the interest is pushing, Dave may know better than I, but between 3 and 4 times our average interest that we experience
You get-
over the long term.
Getting like
on
0.3
these
for a
accounts.
while.
Correct,
0.5.
yeah,
Okay.
so, and we're around 3.9 or 3.6 or something
Correct,
like
yep.
that for the annual returns. And I think the average of the portfolio that these funds are invested in is slightly below
Okay.
2, so.
So maybe more dollars, but the rate, okay, got it. And the
Yeah.
Fed's coming out, so the rates, I stand corrected. We're gonna start to see downward pressure on
We have
treasuries.
to be careful, yeah.
Yeah, that's,
So that's helpful to know.
Financially
going
prudent
into-
for us
We
to
know
assume
that Fed's
that,
gonna
yeah.
come out, right?
Yeah.
They've already telegraphed it, the rates are gonna start to go down, or should. And that will be impact to this, so when we don't wanna get too far ahead of ourselves when we're understanding, you talked about town meeting or special town meeting, and whether we look at that for 25, but there's a real possibility 26, 27, if history's any indication, that that's gonna come down, okay. I
yeah,
get it.
and local
Right.
receipts may become more level at the 26 or 27 rate that we're anticipating.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you. Any questions? Sorry, I monopolized that.
That's okay.
Beth, go ahead.
Could you explain to me the difference in the landfill? I thought that
Oh,
was
yeah.
pretty set
That's-
as far as,
No, that's a great, so the landfill, we have budget figures and we have projections. We work really closely with our partner, Wind Waste, that manages the landfill. And we receive funding based on the amount of cubic airspace that's consumed during the period of time. There are true-ups that are done on a regular basis, and there may be moments where they are able to bring in additional ash from other areas and deposit them there, which then basically means they consumed more, not so much that's going to reduce their long-term plan, but it was more than they anticipated in that one point in time in the year. And sometimes there's true-up payments as well, so.
gotcha, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
That's my question.
Okay. Anything else? No? Kevin, do you have any comments? Questions?
No, on the landfill, you know, sometimes if we get to the end of the year and one of those, you know, we work with the operator and they say we've made 12 payments, we need to make a true up, you know, do you want to push it into the ensuing fiscal year? If we've met budget, we'll do that just to kind of stack the following year and help with the unknowns. So I think that may have been the case.
That happens sometimes as well,
You know,
yeah.
so we kind of got 13 payments in one year and, you know, because of that true up that Dave mentioned.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great, no action required with respect to that item. Going to new business. Review and act authorize the town manager to sign a host community agreement with Pharmacanis, Massachusetts, Inc., DBA Verilife. This item requests the select board authorize the town manager to sign a new host community agreement with Pharmacanis, Massachusetts, DBA Verilife, consistent with the updated Cannabis Control Commission regulations. And the current agreement expires after 5 years, so that's what we're up to. That's in front of us now, compliant with the new guidelines.
Yeah, so the agreement is compliance with the new guidelines. As we've been preparing for and mentioning at every finance committee hearing for the last few years, we'll no longer, or we haven't relied upon, but we'll no longer receive kind of the default 3% host community fee as the CCC regulations have changed over time. So we haven't been budgeting for that, so there's not a financial impact on our long-term outlook. There would be a monetary impact because we wouldn't be receiving these funds. So cannabis licenses through the CCC last 5 years, so we're getting to the end of that first 5-year cycle. So while the businesses have not been open for 5 years, and our exact host community agreements would last until they are, the CCC regulations changing is requiring us to enter into new agreements. Everything else is the same. We'll continue to receive the 3% local option cannabis excise.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Not entertain a motion?
Move to authorize the town manager to sign a host community agreement with Pharmacanis, Massachusetts, Inc., DBA Verilife.
Second.
Have been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Next item is to review and vote to call a special town meeting for Monday, November 18th, 2024 at 7 PM. This item requests the Select Board to call for a special town meeting on November 18th, like I just said, to go over usual budget adjustment matters and matters that were discussed earlier today. Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Have been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next item is to review and act on the streetlight request of Toden Ganguly, 1 Rockwell Avenue, for streetlights to be installed in the vicinity of 1 Rockwell Drive. As you know, if the board agrees, we'd send this over to Selco for their study. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Have been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next item is to review and act on the address change request of National Home Executives, Inc. to change 6971 Edgewater Avenue to 4 Sterling Street, Units A and B. This item requests our approval to an address change request pursuant to our operational policy 29. The request seeks to change the address for a vacant wooded lot that will be developed into a 2-family property. So the request from 6971 Edgewater Avenue, change it to 4 Sterling Street, Unit A and B. Any questions or comments? If not, entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Have been moved and seconded, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next item is to review and act on the road closure request from the Spirit of Shrewsbury for portions of Municipal Drive, Wesleyan Terrace, Maple Avenue, and Oak Street for the Spirit of Shrewsbury Parade from 11 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. on Sunday, September 29th, 2024. Hard to believe it's that time already again. Historically, we have not done this, but this year there was a request for, due to insurance requirements, so as a matter of good corporate governance or board governance going forward, that just makes sense to approve it like we do in our capacity as road commissioners. Is there a motion?
I don't know if you read the full thing, so I'll read it.
Oh, yeah, please do. Sorry, I took a
Move
shortcut
to
there.
approve the road closure request of Spirit of Shrewsbury for portions of Municipal Drive, Wesleyan Terrace, Maple Avenue, and Oak Street for the Spirit of Shrewsbury Parade from 11 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. on September 29th, 2024.
Second.
Have been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Now we're going to correspondence. Item 14, email dated September 3rd, 2024, from David Hewitt, Epsilon Associates, Inc., regarding expanded environmental notification from submittal for the redevelopment of 193 Hartford Turnpike in Shrewsbury. So noted. Next item is email dated September 5th, 2024, from Daniel J. Rassicott of Mass DOT regarding Shrewsbury Adaptive Signal Control Study. The email states that giving us a heads up on an upcoming change in Shrewsbury to provide us with information. Mass DOT is planning a study on the adaptive signal control technology system along Route 9 from Lakeway Commons to Lake Street in Shrewsbury to test its efficacy compared to traditional signal systems. The intersections that will be affected during the study are Lakeway Commons, Harrington Avenue, Maple Avenue, Oak Street, and Lake Street. And Mass DOT is planning on conducting the study for a period of 2 weeks starting on September 16th, 2024. So noted. Now we're in correspondence. Items 16 through 23 I'll take together. They're all the same. Nicotine-free generation, regarding saying no to nicotine-free generation regulations. So noted.
Excuse me, can I ask a question about,
Sure.
because we keep getting them,
We actually apparently get, yes, we do.
No one in Shrewsbury.
but no one who sent these is actually from Shrewsbury. So is there just some campaign going on that I'm unaware of that doesn't affect Shrewsbury? Because I feel like the last time we did a nicotine anything, it went through the Board of Health.
There's no conversation about this at our Board of Health. And we know, I think it was
It
Brookline
was Brookline.
passed legislation to this effect, and it was upheld in court. So I don't know to the extent that other communities are getting this type of correspondence, but if it's coming to us because someone thinks we're doing something, we're not.
Okay, so we're just noting them and moving on.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
as Mr. Mizikar stated, Brookline was upheld by the SGC as constitutional. So maybe they're just getting ahead of it and seeing if.
They're obviously form emails. I mean, they're all
Oh, yeah,
exactly.
it's dear null set or whatever it says up top. Yeah, no.
Right, dear Knoll Select Board, because they're not, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't even know.
yes, but that's why I took them in tandem,
Thank you.
of course. Next item, ZBA decisions, and I will take them in tandem as well. There's no reason for me to have to read them. Items 24 through 28, various ZBA decisions, all taken as of August 26, 2024. So noted. That is it for the agenda. Unless there's anything else that members would like to discuss, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I've been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned. We will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining us. Good night.